pretty cold here in Amsterdam. Just a little weather update. And gladly, I'm so happy that my throat has recovered after 5 days of coughing, like left, right, and center. So I can talk to you guys and, of course, bring our speakers to you in just a bit. We've got two amazing speakers with us today. One of them is not going to go on camera for obvious reasons, and we're going to reveal that really soon.
Oh, God, it's not that dramatic. I had a few little minor things cut off my face by the doctor, so I am very ugly today, but I'm here with my voice.
We understand, Andy, and I hope you get well soon. And your face looks camera, picturable really soon, so we can see your face all over again. And we've got Sanat with us. I'm just going to hand over the mic to both of them in a bit to introduce themselves. They are our top-notch, amazing consultants. And I'm so happy to be hosting this session with them all over again. I think I'm doing this with them in months. It's been a while since we did it. Very excited to see all the insights that we bring to the table today. We're going to be talking a lot about diversity today. And a couple of other topics that have come to notice, which we want to answer for all of you, along with any questions that you might have. I'm Paridhi, co-founder of MBA&Beyond, here with you with two of our very amazing consultants to answer any questions you have related to GMAT, GRE applications, whatever rounds, intakes, anything that's popping up in your head, your background, your country, your geography, whatever you're thinking, US versus Europe, we're here to answer. So how we're going to do this session, first 20-25 minutes, we're going to be tackling some of the questions that have come through to us from our candidates. And these are some of the pressing questions that almost everybody wants to get answered. After that, we are going to tackle all the questions that might pop up in your head as we go through the session. Feel free to drop them in the chat box here, or feel free to raise your hands. We would love to see your faces. We want to make this a very interactive session since it's a closed group, as you can already see. As I understand that some of you are looking to work with MBA&Beyond in the near future, or maybe in a few days. So if you've got any questions about the process or anything, feel free to ask them as well. So I think let's get started without much ado. Sanat, would you like to take over, introduce yourself, followed by Andy, and then we will go on from there.
Sure. Thanks, Paridhi. Lovely to be doing this. It's actually been a while. Lovely to see you again, Paridhi. I just graduated from my MBA program at IE July this year, and I'm currently based in Madrid, working as a product consultant for a venture builder firm. Previous to this, I had 4 years of experience working for a design agency in India, where I worked as a software developer and as a tech lead. Happy to answer any of the questions you have around tech, entrepreneurship, MBA, because those are basically my interests. But any other questions you have around GMAT or the admissions process in general, happy to answer any questions you have.
Yeah, and I think every time people who are thinking about post-MBA goal entrepreneurship or whatever it is, guys, please go ahead. Sanat is your guide today. It's always impressive and interesting to see, because some of you I know have that as a passion, but how to integrate it in your journey, especially if you're an engineer trying or intending to move to entrepreneurship side, how can MBA help you? Sanat might possibly be able to answer your questions today. Over to you, Andy, if you would love to. I would love to hear your...
So I'm pretty sure I'm one of the oldest people at MBA&Beyond. I was head of student life at INSEAD for 7 years, from 2011 to 2017. I live just across the Golden Gate Bridge from San Francisco, and I really get I do not have an MBA, by the way, but I know I speak MBA because I was down in the trenches for a long time. And I don't know, I just really love doing this. I love bringing out the best in people and calming their fears, and watching a person from the introduction to admission is really a great source of joy for me. So I'm happy to be here.
Amazing, Andy. And I was just talking to one of your candidates who's just made it to INSEAD. I think I was talking to him day before yesterday, and how I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing, how he says that, hey, talking to Andy was so much like a therapy. So I was like,
I hear that a lot. And if you're going to be successful in these applications, you really need to be honest. A lot of people try to cover up their weaknesses or appear to be perfect in all aspects, and admissions teams can see through that. They know that you're not putting your honest self forward. So I love getting to the core of who people are and what their stories are. And what's really fantastic about the MBA and Beyond process is that little tiny anecdotes and little stories from your past, you think, oh, this is not important, but Andy, I'm going to tell you about this. I'm like, holy moly, you take care of street dogs in your neighborhood, or you mentor young women about financial stuff, and little things that people don't think are important. The consultants, it's their job to make them realize, yes, in fact, this is really important. So I really get exhilarated by digging deep into people's stories.
Yeah. So I think we can really get started with the first question, which relates to, Andy, what you just mentioned, that some little tiny pieces of our stories, which we tend to miss and we think are maybe not so important, but they eventually might add up to something that business schools value. So the question that has been asked, and like a lot of candidates often face this as a challenge when they're thinking their stories and thinking about their applications when it comes to business school, they only think resumes. So they are asking, how can I effectively showcase diversity in my background and experiences within my application? And what are some of the strategies to make my unique qualities and experiences stand out in a competitive application pool? So just to like sum it up, I can say, if somebody belongs to an over competitive pool, how can they outshine when with a diverse application? So thoughts on that, Andy, Sanat, would love to hear.
I would say, the act of putting together an application and the act of writing these essays, it's really about prioritization. So the MBA and Beyond process, you go through the content gathering and we talk about what, we get into these stories. And then you're hit with this force of nature called the word count. And so, oh gosh, you have to, I have all these things to talk about, but I only have 300, 400 words. So it becomes an exercise in prioritization. And okay, well, do we want to tell the story about you rescuing stray dogs, or do we want to tell the story about you are a piano player who performs in different countries? And we talk about it. And so the question is, how do I separate myself from the pack? I always say to my clients, imagine yourself in an interview with an alumni from the school you're applying to, and you want to have a conversation with them that you feel highlights your strengths. So it's you can't include everything in your background. Let's start with that premise. Everything, content gathering documents can sometimes be many pages. So we get to know you as consultants. We talk about your what appeals to us in this branding document. What rises to the top, the cream rises to the top. And then as we go through the process, your awesomeness starts to shine through.
Yeah, that's and I think I can add 2 cents to it. But before that, Sanat, maybe if you've got any thoughts, how can candidates add diversity to their profile, especially if they're coming from an overrepresented pool, or let's say Indian male engineer.
I hate that expression, by the way, Pariti. I hate that overrepresented. I get so pissed off every time I hear a school use that term. So anyway, sorry, Sanat, go back to you.
Yeah, Sanat, if you've got, I know it's like a jargon we use, in the business world. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's a reality. Yeah. I just don't like that term.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I would like to use the analogy of all of us have different faces to us. So it just depends on which face we want to show to the school. And it also depends a lot on which school we are targeting in specifically, because not every story is going to sell at every school. So like how we say horses for courses, it's going to be stories for schools. So that also becomes very important, because once we go through the content gathering process, we get like a ton of stories, and then picking and choosing which story is shows the right thing that the school is looking for, that becomes important. So I think that way, like through the content gathering process, once candidate gives us all the stories, then it just becomes a matter of us going through with the candidates, speaking about what is the strongest story to put forward.
Yep.
I totally
I think
agree. Oh, sorry, Preeti.
Yeah, no, I was just summing up because I know people don't know when we're using the term content gathering. So I just wanted to take a moment and explain to our potential candidates what content gathering really means and what MBA and Beyond and you guys mean by content gathering. So it's just a reflection of you. It's like an introspection journey that you take with your consultant, or you follow certain steps just to go within and dig into the deep stories that you've lived so far. So it's basically all your life stories coming into content, in front of the consultant, in front of you in different sections, where of course we've tried to structure it in a way that is more meaningful to business school. So we talk about your goals, your strengths, your weaknesses, failures, international exposure when it comes to schools like INSEAD and LBS. It's really heavily counted. Extracurriculars, and what's your purpose with an MBA. So all of these things, they really require you to follow certain frameworks or a way of thinking, read some samples, understand what others have said, so that it could nudge your thought process without compromising your originality. So we give you space to write as much as possible without thinking about word count in the beginning. And then, of course, your consultants are able to, of course, groom you, hold your hand if there are points where you're getting stuck with. For example, most of our candidates, and Andy and Sanat can really vouch for this, they do get stuck with the why MBA question. They do get confused about the goals, because when it comes to short-term and long-term goals, they are really thinking very generic goals. This is one of the very generic goals that you see out here consulting. It's management consulting. People do want to become management consultants and product managers, but it may not be the best goal for, the profile that you're bringing to the table to say it out loud in your application. So these kind of things which really bring out collinearity in your application are going to mean a lot when you're bringing the personal touch. And it's very important to talk about your personal stories in the whole process of content gathering and go beyond your resume. That's when you will be able to give it a unique flavor, a unique touch, which your consultants are going to, of course, help you going forward. Yes, Andy, you wanted to add something.
Well, first, I was going to agree with what Sanat said about the different answers for different schools. And, what schools like to see is that you've put thought into your career path. You've put thought into why you're applying to that school. Like, so why an MBA is one question, but another one is why INSEAD or why LBS or why NYU? Like, it needs to be obvious that you've put thought into this. And then the other thing I just wanted to mention, recently clients of mine have been struggling with weaknesses and failures. And oh my God, if I tell them the truth, then I want to make the distinction between the two. So in my mind, a weakness is something in your personality or your work history that you've identified or your managers have identified and you're working on. So for me, a weakness was always follow through. I'm really good at starting things and not so good at following up on them. And it's been mentioned in performance evaluations, and I'm conscious and mindful of it, and I work on that. A failure is more like a specific incident. Like, I worked on this project with the dean and I tried and it didn't work out, and this is what I learned retrospectively. So I want people who are considering applying for MBAs to don't be afraid of talking about things in your career that have not gone well, as long as you're aware of them and are addressing. That's my little speech on weaknesses and failures.
Yeah, I think that's a very important point that you've touched, Andy. Not many people are so like how confusing a weakness or a failure can become. I think a strength and an achievement is also as confusing to our candidates. Do you have, as a follow-up question, do you have any advice on how one should differentiate between a strength and an achievement?
Yeah, so a strength, I mean, it's the same, it's the mirror image of the weakness and failure. So a strength is something that you feel is it's something that you'll take with you to any job or any situation wherever you go. So, I mean, you touched on it with me earlier. People say I have a lot of empathy, like people open up to me and I'm people don't feel like I'm judging them. That's a strength. And then an achievement might be, for example, a client that I got into INSEAD and the steps that we took from not knowing them at all to that acceptance. Because I'm in California and a lot of my clients are in other time zones, the best feeling for me is when I wake up and I grab my phone and I've got a WhatsApp from a client and they are tears of joy because they are accepted into their dream school. There's no greater feeling than that as a consultant.
Absolutely. Sanat, do you have any inputs for strength versus achievement? Any
No, I
insight?
think Andy put it pretty precisely, hit the nail on the head.
Great. Okay, so now comes the question, which of course everybody's hanging by that nail: GMAT, GRE versus the application. Like they're two different things, to be honest. That's how a lot of applicants see it. So the question is, are there specific approaches to GMAT or GRE that can complement my overall profile? When it comes to GMAT or GRE, how should I strategically balance them with other aspects of my application? So any thoughts on that, Sanat, Andy? Like how would you weigh a GMAT, GRE with the whole overall application?
Yeah, I think at least having gone through the application process myself at the beginning of the application, we tend to um, give more weight to the GMAT or GRE, more importance to it than it actually deserves, because the schools actually look into the other aspects of the application as well. Having said that, that doesn't mean we need to take the tests lightly and just brush it off, because it also is still a part of the application and is equally important. And as we all know that these tests also have the quant part and the verbal part, and it's also important to showcase your abilities via those things, because like when if we say that we are great at communication, we are great at stakeholder management, that is what I do at on a day-to-day basis for my job, but then your verbal score on the GMAT is not really reflecting that. It's pretty weak. Then that is a kind of a red flag for the school itself. So we also need to keep those minor points in mind when we are approaching the GMAT or the GRE.
I could not agree more. And the thing is, it's so funny you say that, because I'm working with a client now who put herself forward as a really strong communicator, but then her LORs are not backing that up. And I think the point you're making, Sanat, about having a consistent message throughout each aspect of your everything, you think about all the material we're submitting. It's resumes and essays and LORs, and there's if the GMAT score is completely the opposite of what we're putting forth in the other material, then it does cause questions. And okay, but all that being said, I don't think people should freak out if they're not getting like 760s on their GMAT. It's one metric that's considered amongst many. Yes, if you're getting a 580, you're probably not going to get into Harvard or Stanford, but I don't think people a great GMAT score doesn't guarantee you're going to get in, and a bad GMAT score doesn't guarantee you're not going to get in. That's the theme of my GMAT speech when I talk to new clients.
Yeah, I think, Andy, the sentence that you just made, that there is no one size that fits all when it comes to GMAT. And I'd like to really summarize when it comes to application, we cannot distinguish between a score and an essay. So mostly in our heads as an applicant, I understand, we are only thinking we are going to put like 4 months into getting the best score possible, and then we are going to give 1 month to writing 5 applications. And I know we're just like a month away, and the kind of thinking and introspection that it requires to come up with a kick-ass application 1 month for 5 different schools, where you have to think about why Stanford, why Howard, why NCR, LBS, why HEC, it may not be sufficient. Just thinking for that specific answer for specific schools. You need to understand the schools. You need to talk to the alums of the schools, students of the schools, admissions committee, whatnot. So I think one thing I'd really like to say, that equal weightage needs to be given, not just to the essays and GMAT, but what Andy pointed out, recommendations, your resume, and of course video interviews if you are doing any. They can really make or break your application, and the application goes much beyond your GMAT GRE scores. So broaden your thought process a little bit. Start thinking about who your recommenders are going to be, because what Andy just said, we've heard a lot of stories like that. Managers backing off at the last moment to vouch for a statement that you really want them to make. It can really break your application.
Can I say one more thing also?
Yeah.
Is that I would recommend that every person take the GMAT more than once, because almost without fail, just the act of taking it a second time, you're going to bump it up a little bit. And then I have had clients who felt like they weren't realizing the potential and they could get a better score. Maybe they were having a bad day or a headache on the day of the test. So they take the test again and they do much better. So I always encourage people to take the GMAT at least twice.
Absolutely. And I think that's another point that I'd like to make, and I'd like to make all of you comfortable, that we have seen candidates who've taken GMAT up to 8 to 10 times just to get to the best score while working on their applications throughout the year. So if you're not
Can I answer? I see that question about a reapplicant, and I just want to touch on that real quick. I'm actually working with a reapplicant right now, and this is true not just for INSEAD, but for any reapplication, is that they want to know basically what's different about your application now than the first one you submitted. And so, and I've actually been talking with Shantanu about this, the focus needs to be on what you've accomplished in the past since the original application. Have you been promoted? Have you taken any courses? Have you achieved anything, outside of the office? So a reapplication is not that different than a regular application. However, what the admissions team is going to be looking at is what you've achieved since your original application. And, have you taken the GMAT again? Have you added clients? So working with reapplicants is different, but in many ways, it's also the same. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, I think so too. And there's some more questions coming in, because we're going to come back to your question after touching upon the last bit with Sanat and Andy, and then we're going to answer all your questions. Feel free to drop your questions like Vikas and Jigyasa have just done, guys. So the last one, Andy and Sanat, that has come through to us is about letters of recommendation, as we are talking about it. Could you elaborate on the significance of letters of recommendation in the application? Again, it's more like a weightage question, like how much importance does it hold? And how do I ensure that my letters of recommendation emphasize my strengths and contributions to create a well-balanced application? So the importance, and like how can potentially applicants tackle the LORs? Sanat.
Right. So letters of recommendation at the end of the day to the school acts as proof of work, right? Like for example, someone can go around saying that they have built 10 websites, but then how do you know unless they show you those 10 websites? So basically, letters of recommendations to the school is that, like when you say, okay, like I've done A, B, and C with some person, and then you get a letter of recommendation from them, the school is expecting that person to speak about the A, B, and C that you've mentioned in the application so that the school knows that you're not lying to them. So it becomes important as a way of, backing up everything that you've said in your essays. And also, it is important, for example, if you say that one of your strengths or one of your core skills, which your company appreciates or, which has been working for you, is that you have maintained amazing relationships with your clients, but then your letters of recommendations are just coming from your two recent managers, then this school might, th- dig a little deeper into that particular portion. But then in case one of your letters of recommendations is actually from a client of yours that actually backs up everything that you've said in your application. So consider your letters of recommendation as proof of work and ensure that they are very coherent with the stories that you've built in your essays.
Yeah, you're really smart, huh? So not that I can tell you have an MBA, huh? I feel the same. And the thing about letters of recommendation is that, most often when you ask somebody to write a letter of recommendation, they're just going to say, you know what, I'm a busy person, just write the darn thing and I'll sign it. So then you have to decide, like, okay, and yes, so not what you said is exactly right. If you can, your application, your essays are built on anecdotes and stories. If you can find somebody in one of those stories to be one of your recommenders, that strengthens, that story becomes much more powerful. I will say this though, I dealt with a client one time and he kept telling me that one of his strengths was negotiation. Oh, I'm a really good negotiator. I'm like, well, great. Do you have anyone that can talk about that? No, not really, but I want to put that in my essay. Okay. Weeks went by and I'm like, I need a story. I need to hear one example when you were a good negotiator. And he finally came back to me and said, well, I didn't mean negotiating between parties. I can't find a recommender for that. I meant negotiating the voices inside my own head. I'm like, man, that is not what we're looking for here. If you're a good negotiator, I need a story or a recommender who's going to say that. So in many ways, the letters of recommendation are where the rubber hits the road. And if you can find people to back up what you say are your strengths, it makes those strengths all the more vivid and powerful for the admissions team.
Absolutely. I think these are some very insightful points that you both have raised. I just do a follow-up question on this before we tackle Vikas's question. Do you have a recommendation on who should an applicant pick as a recommender? I mean, this question comes through to us multiple times, especially when you've worked with different managers and you've had like a senior manager who's like the boss of your manager and all of that. So is there like a certain set of rules that we should follow as an applicant?
I mean, nothing is set in stone, and this is just my personal opinion, but if possible, I like a current supervisor like that. That's always nice. I don't like to go back too far. I've had people ask if they could have like high school teachers, and no, that doesn't really. You have to imagine that you are in the chair of the person reading the application in New York or Fontainebleau or wherever, and would a current supervisor or the most recent supervisor be more powerful than somebody who you worked with maybe 10 years ago? So I don't think there's any rules, but just general wisdom about how well does this person know you, how long has it been since they worked with you, that kind of thing. And I'm sure Sanat has another opinion.
Sanat, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I think the first thing would be to get a letter of recommendation with someone who has worked closely with you and knows you really well. who can, if you don't give them a prompt, like, and you said, like, there will be some recommenders who are like, I'm very busy, I just want to sign it. But then there are also others who actually want to write it on their own. So if the person who's writing it on their own doesn't really know you well, then they won't back up the stories that you've said. Like, they might speak on a very high level, which actually won't be as effective. Because I once had and also to Andy's point about, going far back, I once had a client who was like, I used to be the cricket captain of my high school team. So can I get my high school cricket team's coach to write the letter of recommendation? Yes, of course. I mean, it's amazing that you've kept in touch with your coach after all these years, but then you also need to realize that you're a very changed person than what your coach saw you when you were 15. So you need to keep those things in mind and keep your letter of the recommender very recent and someone who has actually worked with you and knows you pretty well.
Absolutely. And one thing I'd like to just add here, when you're picking your recommenders, and of course, like there was a client we were working with, she just made it to Fuqua, but she had a tiff with her like immediate manager. It is important for all of you to have, first of all, good rapport with your managers, because sometimes you don't have a choice. You really have to be in the good books of your managers. So try to do that. But if that is not the case, then of course there are alternate ways to figure around it. But the best is that your manager or whoever is going to be writing it for you, they know what are the key pointers that they really need to highlight in their recommendation if they're going to be writing for you. Because like Andy said, it has to be collinear and everything has to go hand in hand. So you could be talking about negotiation and they cannot be talking about DEI or something, or, it is not really making a strong story. So think of it as a supporting evidence that's bolstering your case in front of the admissions committee, who really wants to perceive you as a global business leader being vouched for by your own managers. So it's important that you speak the same tone, speak same language. And do you want to say last few words on this?
No, I think it's all been said. Pariti, would you mind if I took a whack at some of these questions in the chat, or do you want me to?
Now it's time to tackle all the questions. So we can start with Vikas's question.
So let me. What I'll do is I'll quickly give my opinion on these questions, and then we'll pass it over to Sanath, and he can give his opinion.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Okay, so because I see does the application essay need to follow a certain format or address certain questions? The answer is every school has different questions. So like LBS, for example, they ask directly, how will your past experience plus an MBA from LBS contribute to achieving your goals? Well, that's just exactly what you're asking. However, some schools are not that blatant about it. They don't say why INSEAD, but if you don't get the question in the essay, for sure you're going to get it in the interview with the alumni. You have many schools to choose from. So is it about geography, or do you want to go into consulting? So that, I hope that answers your question, but there's no set formula. Every school has different questions. And then quickly, about this master's in management or master's in strategy. So at the INSEAD, at least, and I think pretty much this is true for other programs as well, master's in management is considered a pre-experience degree. It's for people who really want to go straight into, maybe with only 1 or 2 years of experience. INSEAD framed their master's in management and master's in finance as a younger demographic. Maybe you're 23 or 24 or even 25. But then as you get into your mid to early 30s, that's more for the MBA. Is the competition different? Yes, because people have less work experience. And then just quickly about this LinkedIn recommendations. I mean, yes, clients, sure, if they're going to say something powerful, you're only allowed to submit 1 or 2 LORs. And so that has to come from the person who can speak the most intelligently and powerfully on you and your performance. So LinkedIn clients are fine as long as they are going to say great things about you. All right, we might as well knock off Muchesh's one too. Well, adcoms are going to take a holistic view still. What are the 3 deal breakers? Gosh, 3 deal breakers, I would say job hopping. Try to stay in, if you've had 8 jobs for 6 months each, that's not good. a record of very poor academic performance, and then dishonesty. If you've ever, I don't know if you're saying things that aren't true, it'll get found out, in an interview or background check. So real quick, all right, I'm gonna stop talking now and hand this over to Sanat.
Sanat, do you want to give a quick rundown on the questions with your opinions? And of course, like we can all have different thoughts. So go ahead.
Yeah, sure. I think Andy pretty much spoke to the why MBA and why our university question, like Vikas's question and Shaurya's question. For Kanika's question, again, the same thing, like if we have a recommendation on LinkedIn from a client and they are ready to give the LOR as well, like that's amazing. That would work. But if the question means that would a LinkedIn recommendation hold good for an application, not really, because the LOR format for the application itself is different and needs to be personally sent by the person who you have chosen as your recommender. The three deal breakers, it's very difficult to pull out three, but then the one thing that comes to the top of my head is if the application is not coherent. I think that is a huge red flag because you're speaking about like for example, I noticed this happening with a lot of candidates where they speak about a different short-term goal in one essay, and when there's an actual essay about the short-term and long-term goals, they speak about a completely different short-term goal. So you need to consider your entire application as one and not the essays as individual essays, and ensure that your entire application is coherent and you're able to back up every single claim that you have made. Because, like Andy said, once you get into the interview, the admissions committee, their job throughout the year is just to review all these applications. So it's very easy for them to know when someone is not being truthful on the application. So it's very important to have it coherent and truthful.
Yeah.
How does sorry, but you had something to add?
No, go ahead. Yeah, the next one, if you want to take a shot at it, go for it.
Yeah, how does the AdCom perceive an applicant with 8+ years of experience? That's a very interesting question because like most schools usually have their average age for the MBA around 28 or 29. So we need to know that it's the average age. So there are people on both sides of the spectrum. So when you have 8 years of work experience, that would basically you can actually use that experience as a strength because for someone who's 24 and who's sitting in that classroom, you coming with that much of experience, that itself is an entire learning curve for that person who's just stepping into um, the workforce, right? So use that diversified experience of, I'm sure in 8 years you would have like so much. So you play a lot on your experience because that adds a lot of value in the classroom, which is something the admissions committee also looks at, is what you bring to the table when you enter into a classroom.
I'll just like to add one thing there. I think what Sanat is saying is completely something that I would also say, but you may also want to have a very strong reason for why do you want to go for an MBA at this stage. As long as you have an answer, number of years does not matter. You can write a convincing story at 3 years of experience or at 13. Does not matter. If it's the need for you, it's the need for you. And if you can write a convincing story, you can. While we need to be very conscious of the fact that an MBA is a lot around, like it is, the basis of it is peer-to-peer learning. So like Asanat said, while you can bring a lot to the table, you may also want to see what do you want to get in exchange or in return. So it's based on a lot of reciprocity. That's why you will see a lot of people with higher number of years of experience are found more in the European business schools, where of course the programs are shorter, and in US business schools, the average age and the average number of years of experience is slightly lesser. It falls in the range of 3 to 5 years for most schools. So yes, make your pick, but yes, you can always be. Business schools do not have a distinction basis that.
Can I also, I'd like to piggyback on that a little bit. It feels like when people start the process, their mindset is outward, like what school will have me and how can I get in? And the truth is, and this is really, I think, the value of MBA and Beyond, is that we turn the focus inward and, what can you offer to the school? What are you bringing to the program? I mean, some schools ask it directly, what are you going to bring to the program? But a lot of times the first call I have with a client, they're really surprised because, what about this school, and what about what GMAT do I need to get into Harvard? It's like, don't think that way. Think about what aspects of my decades of life can I highlight to the school that's going to make them proud to offer me a position and proud to have them as an alumni. So, I see all these questions scrolling by about, top 15 schools and all that stuff. And it's like, don't think that way. Think about yourself as a person and your character, and how are you going to improve the culture of the school. And if you think about yourself and help the consultant put your best self forward, you're going to get into your dream school. I'm confident.
Absolutely. Sanat, there's a question pointed at you again by Mitesh. Do you want to take that one up?
Yeah, the GMAT score for the top 15 schools. Again, like Andy was just alluding to and we also spoke about previously, there is no one GMAT score which will get you into the school that you need. It is there are people who have scored 780 on the GMAT and did not get into the top business school. And also we should also think about it from the perspective of what do we get from the school, right? Because every school also has their own things that they are good at. Speaking from personal experience, like I graduated from IE. I chose IE because it was known for tech and entrepreneurship, which was where I saw my career going. Whereas if you are looking into consulting, then probably INSEAD is the one you would go into. So you also need to look at what is the school offering me. So
That's
it's
right.
because at the end of the day, it's a two-way thing, and MBA is not a small time and money commitment. So you also need to not just focus on getting into the top school, but also the best school for what you need from the MBA.
I'm working with a client now on a Stanford application, and she's clean energy and sustainability, and maybe with a little smattering of tech thrown in there. So Stanford and Berkeley make good sense because she's going to be near the Silicon Valley, and both of those schools are kind of cutting edge in terms of sustainable, renewable, clean energy and that kind of thing. I'd also quickly like to talk about this extracurricular question here I see. So no, you don't need proof or certification about your extracurriculars. However, you may get asked about them in an interview, and the worst thing that can happen is you get asked about something you've written in an essay, and it comes to like, oh yes, I play the violin. Oh, where do you play? When do you play? Oh, I haven't actually played since 2014. So you don't need certification or proof, but I always say, I'm going to use a bad word, schools have a really good bullshit detector. And if you're saying something that's not true, they're going to catch it. So don't say anything that doesn't ring true.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, no size fits all. Just to give some hope, while of course we've seen 770 not making it through INSEAD and Harvard, we've also seen a 630 making it to INSEAD. But yeah, a lot of effort and time goes in there, not just from consultant side, but from you as an applicant, going above and beyond, getting your profile noticed for the right things that you're bringing to the table. So this story, Mitesh, I've just shared with you. You can read that up later. This girl really went above and beyond to connect with almost everybody at INSEAD. So she made sure that everybody knew her profile. And also she made sure that all the good parts about about her profile, which was international exposure, which is what INSEAD really values, are being highlighted sufficiently in her application to offset her GMAT score, which was really low. So it's all possible with a low score as well. But yes, you need to make sure you're doing your bit. We've got Anshul's question. Andy, Sanat, do you want to take that one? Anyone? Extracurriculars.
Yeah. Well, I did briefly touch on that. a lot of people do ask me, do I need proof of my extracurriculars? And no, you really don't. And as far as, okay, so undergrad or high school, I get this question a lot, and the answer is, if you're still doing this extracurricular, like if you were on the swim team in high school and then in college and you still swim, sure. And, you know, the truth about these extracurriculars, like INSEAD's question is, what are your extracurriculars and how do they affect your relationship with others? So are you on a team? Are you, helping tutor people in the community? Like, you can rattle off a list of all the things you do in your free time, but they want to know how those activities affect your view of yourself and your place in the world. So sure, it's fine to do them. It's fine to list them from a long time ago if you still do them. If you haven't done something in a long time, then don't waste their time.
Yep. I wouldn't add anything to that. I think you answered. Sanat, no. Right. Okay. Vikas is asking, is there a higher? This is like a standard question. I think I should already always answer this. Is there a higher priority given for GMAT over GRE? No, absolutely not. And even if you have a question about over the new GMAT format versus old, then absolutely not. Nobody, schools don't have a preference. Unless, Andy, Sana, do you want to say something about this? Do you get this asked also often?
Yeah. I mean, what's interesting is I've had people take one test and not do well, and then take the other test and do well. So it's more about comfort and format. And I always strongly urge people to come to the party with at least having taken a mock test, so that we know. It can put a lot of pressure on yourself if you think, oh, I'm going to take the exam 2 weeks before the application deadline. I'm sure I'll do fine. And then it's like, oh my God, I'm way lower than I expected. So take a test, and if you feel like it's just really not, it's not for you, then go ahead and take a mock of the other one and see how you do.
Absolutely.
But don't wait. I have people coming to MBA and Beyond. I have clients who I meet 8-10 months before their application. Maybe not 10 months, but 6 months at least. The worst thing you can do is pull the trigger on this whole process 4 or 5 weeks in advance. The more time you give yourself, the better your application is going to be.
Yep.
Yeah. Hey, and Sanat, thanks for that. It was me who popped the question. I actually do have a GRE score of 333, which somewhere is said to be equivalent to around 740 or 750. So I really don't want to take a GMAT again if it's not really required.
That's a good score.
Yeah, but
it's a very good score because relax. Just focus on your application if you're targeting round 2. I mean, nobody here is going to say I think it's a good score to apply to any school.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks about that. Yeah, but I heard that the GMAT takes preference because it is tailored for the MBA applicants, and
that's not true. It's a common myth, but I don't think that's true.
It's myths because you can really if you want us to write it and sign it, we are happy to do that. But
okay, that's reassuring. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, I think the next question is quite interesting by Ayush. How does the AdCom perceive a career break? Andy, Sanat, if you've got any thoughts on that.
That's a good one. Well, it's once again, this is where it's really important to be truthful. Why did you take that break? Was there somebody in your family who was sick and you need to take care of them? As long as you're truthful, it's absolutely. A lot of people try to sweep these things under the carpet, like, oh, I don't want people to know that I was in the hospital every day with my grandfather, blah, blah, blah. Like, just be honest with it. I mean, that's my opinion. I don't know, Sanath, if you have another opinion.
Yeah, I think as long as we are able to justify the career break and speak about it, it's really good. Like, of course, there will be serious reasons why people take the career break. But suppose you have taken like 6 months on a journey of self-discovery, like that also can be spun into a positive story because you've spent a lot of time on yourself. That means you come into the application process as a self-assured person who really knows themselves, who really knows what they want out of life. So there are ways to talk about the career break, but again, it's very important to be truthful and open about it. And we see that there is a nice little movement going on where people are becoming more accepting of the career break. So I don't think there's any reason to hide it or be worried about it.
Absolutely. I just top that up with an example of a candidate who's just been invited for the interview at INSEAD. So this candidate has a 670 GMAT, and she was not feeling very well in the job through the process. She was applying last year, but then she decided not to make her application. She was not very happy with the job or with the application that she was putting forth. So she took a break of good 8 months, where 4 months she was just traveling, and it really goes on her LinkedIn profile as a career break. And people are proudly talking about it these days because it's okay to be taking a break. And for the next half of her break, which was 4 months, she volunteered with an organization in Africa. So you can be doing whatever you want to do. It could be self-discovery, it could be giving back to the humanity, it could be really doing anything. And it's okay to be talking about it. Like Andy said, just be honest. Don't try to cover it up with something that you did not do. They will figure it out.
Let me, I want to talk about Mitesh's question here. Mindset shifts within the AdCom community. So I want people to understand I'm really glad this question was asked because it is a very highly guarded secret how these schools make their decisions, okay? We don't know. And I used to have lunch with people on the admissions team at INSEAD, and anytime the conversation would drift towards their thought process, it'd be like, gotta go. It's like they're in the CIA, like they don't talk about it. So, but also something Sanath said earlier about different schools have different priorities. Like INSEAD, one of the biggest priorities is international experience. One thing I can advise people to do is go to the school's website and look at their core values. What do they say are their core values? At orientation week at INSEAD, the dean would always put up a slide about how many students there were from 500 students come in twice a year, and it would be somewhere like 80 or 85 different nationalities. So INSEAD values international experience and diversity. So you can never hope to fully understand how schools and admissions teams make these decisions, but a big clue is going to be by checking out their core values.
Absolutely. And when you're doing the content gathering and the whole mirroring and reflection introspection journey with MBA&Beyond, it's constantly important for you to know the school's values that you're applying to and rethink your own values. So the best way that our consultants and our process advises you to select your schools is not before, but after content gathering. And why is that? So you know yourself better, and you know how much values are you bringing to the table that are matching with a business school. You have to see this as, as a union or as a partnership, a marriage that's happening between values. Because more than schools wanting you or not, you also want a school, and you have to prove it to them that, hey, you also have to be good for me because you match my values, not just me proving myself good to you. So
I want to tell you one quick story about this. When I was working at INSEAD, there were people down the hall from the MBA office, and they were the financial aid people, and they would sit in a room all day with spreadsheets and just looking at, they wouldn't talk to 3 people in the whole day. And then I would have people in and out of my office, 10 times an hour. I'd have people lined up outside my office to talk to me. And I would have lunch with these financial aid people sometimes, and I'd say, if I had your job, I think I would kill myself because I could not sit in a room all day just looking at a spreadsheet. And they would say to me, Andy, if we had your job, we would kill ourselves because I couldn't deal with students all day. So that's a good example of these values we're talking about. And the real value in the MBA&Beyond process is that your consultant is going to draw this out of it. It's not easy. You know, you have to have these conversations, and somebody who's done this for a while is going to pick out the little nuggets of gold in your profile that are going to be the driving force in your essays and your application.
Absolutely, can't agree more. I think that brings us to the end of the questions. Unless you guys have any more questions, you can quickly raise your hands, and we'd be happy to have you on mic. Otherwise, we are happy to wrap this up. This was a very, very fruitful session. Thanks, Andy and Sanat, for great insights. And thanks to you guys for asking such amazing and interesting questions, which go much beyond GRE and GMAT. Trust me, like those are the most boring sessions that I host, where the questions just revolve around, hey, GRE or GMAT, new version, old version, this and that. But yeah, thanks a lot, guys. Oh, Mitesh has one more question now. We can do it. We still have 5 minutes.
The answer is every school, the scholarship list is different. The criteria is different per scholarship. Some are for women, some are for people who want to get into sustainability. So every school has its own separate list, and every scholarship has a different list of criteria, and they can change sometimes from round to round or even year to year. So that's my non-helpful answer.
Okay, so I'm going to be sending out an email to all of you. If there are any questions that pop up even after, please feel free to share your question. I'll be happy to go on a call and discuss your profile in further detail. Thanks a lot, everyone. Thank you, Andy. Thanks, Sanat. Thanks for joining. Have a great week ahead. So take care.